Thank you, ma'am. So, good morning, everyone. I, Saili Jadhav, a representative of Industry Institute Interface Committee, welcomes you all for today's webinar. As a part of students' development activities and Corporate Connect, IMDR continuously organizes webinars by various renowned industry experts. Today, amongst us, we have Mr. Shankar Roddam as our guest of the day. I feel privileged to get this opportunity to introduce today's speaker, who is also an alumnus of IMDR batch of 1995 to 1907. Experienced alumni like Sir are a source of inspiration for their juniors. Their fascinating track records and rich corporate experience add a lot of value to the academic programs of our institution. Shankar Sir is a double graduate. He studied Electronics and Telecommunications Engineering and further graduated Bachelor's in Triple Mathematics from Osmania University. He pursued post-graduation diploma with Sales and Systems as his specialization from IMDR. Shankar Sir joined Mahindra Network Systems in 1997 as a senior business development executive, where he marvelously met the sales target for entire branch in a single quarter. He further worked as an account manager in Tech Mahindra and as a senior manager in Bharti Telesoft before joining Subex Ltd in 2003. Shankar Sir joined Subex Ltd as a sales director in Africa and Middle East. After this stint, Sir took up the responsibility as head of Global Alliances and Partnership in 2010. In 2013, he became a part of leadership team at Subex. In 2019, he was appointed as a Chief Operating Officer of Subex Ltd. Besides this, he is also associated with a few startups over the globe. With his career spanning over 2 decades and a fascinating track record, I am sure Sir has some very valuable insights to share with us. On a final note, Sir, we are very grateful for your presence amongst us today. Without further ado, I would request Sir to take over and share his valuable thoughts with us. Over to you, Sir.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Saili. Well, firstly, I am equally honored and thankful to IMDR and the institution for and the faculty for giving me this opportunity. It's always a pleasure to give it back to the college that you graduated from. So appreciate everyone making this time and giving me the opportunity to share my perspectives. When I was at the college and I have subsequently been in touch with some of the faculty, one of who is Suhas Palekar, sir. He nudged me into doing this conversation with an intent of giving back, I guess, value to the students and making sure the industry and student collaboration continues to thrive. And that's basically what got me to do this session. I will do my best to share whatever little insights and experience I can share, which will hopefully help some of you to be able to take some right decisions and do the right things as you get into the corporate world. We discussed in terms of what could be potentially an area or a subject of interest for the students, and we said, why not just talk about the industry readiness for the graduates as they pass out? And that's what we will try and talk about. What we will do is I'll share some of my thoughts, perspectives, and experiences, but also maybe pause in between to ask or respond to any questions that you may have. Right? But before that, I just have a few questions. Whoever can answer that. How many students do we have across PGDM and PGDM-II? Would anyone be able to give me the answer?
Yes, sir. So in PGDM-I, yes, in PGDM-I we have intake of 180 right now. They are doing internships, and in PGDM-II we have 120. So sure. Many of them are already placed, and a few of them have joined here.
Sure. How many people on an average with experience? Because we are talking today about experience of or industry readiness. So how many people in this entire batch have some form of experience, just as a percentage?
Say 30% around 30%.
30%.
Yeah.
So thanks for that. So let me start by addressing the first question, right? What does it mean to be in the corporate world? The first thing is, I think it's the realization that you are here for a marathon. It's not a race, it's not a race which will get over in few years. But if I suppose as an average, you are probably around 22, 23, right? But trust me, you're going to spend the next 32, 33 years, which is a lot more than what you've lived so far in the corporate world. So it is an endurance race. It is a marathon, and it is something that you need to be prepared for. Right? And more importantly, it is something that you should enjoy in terms of what you're doing, because like I said, 35 years is not an easy thing to do if you really don't enjoy or like what you're doing in that sense. The second is, I'm sure you heard it multiple times, but hard work. In the current experience that you have, whether it be college or elsewhere, most of the outcomes are in your hand. Of course, there is exams, there is faculty, there's competition, but to a large extent, you are in control of the parameters or the variables that influence that, right? I mean, you could control the amount of time you studied, you could control the preparation, etc. The reality is that as you get into the corporate world, firstly, the variables will be significantly out of your control, right? Which means what you plan today is probably and highly likely to change in the next few weeks or months to come. So whatever you're doing, the first thing is the realization that every assumption you make is going to be challenged, and it will need a lot of preparation for the unexpected, right? I mean, how many people predicted that there is going to be a COVID and things are going to change drastically? Yet overnight, things have to happen. Right? Government initiated demonetization, businesses had to transform. Nobody prepared for it, but that got people thinking, saying, what do I now need to do to adapt to the new so-called normal, right? And all of these are changes that will be significantly outside your control. So it is important to be aware and be prepared to handle any form of unexpected outcomes that can happen, right? Maybe it is a colleague, maybe it is your boss, maybe it is the team, maybe it is a function, and maybe it is the organization going through a significant transformation. But to counter for all of this, there is only one thing which you can do, which is hard work. Right? So make sure hard work is there, but equally be prepared for the unexpected. The second thing is performance ultimately matters. I mean, people talk about being smart, people trying to be nice to your boss, your colleagues, all of that. But the reality is, in this corporate world, if there is one thing that speaks, it is your performance. And I can tell you from my own experience that in one of my early roles after I graduated from IMDR, I basically had to take up the job of a sales rep. That was pretty much my first job after IMDR. And I was reporting into someone who was just about a one year pass out earlier than me. That's where I started my career. And one would have questioned the rationale in terms of why I took that decision. Obviously, there were reasons, but I think what I will still recollect what I did, which was put your head down, keep doing a job, don't worry about anything else, just focus on the outcomes, right? And ultimately, the rest of the organization, whether they acknowledge it or not, they know that you are delivering and they know that you perform, right? And there will be a time when you will be able to stand up and speak for your own work. I remember again fondly as part of my initial career, I used to have a register. I mean, these days we don't use any of the diaries, but I used to have a diary, and every day I would make a note of my entire schedule, the calls to be made, customers to be spoken to. If I was on the field making calls, I would make a plan in terms of the sequence of meetings that I would do. And even now, if I were to open my diary, I can exactly tell you what were the sequence of meetings and who did I meet. And I mean, obviously at that point we were claiming mileage, so I even knew how many kilometers, how much time it took. Obviously, it was too much of detail for one, but when it came to the end of the year, when there were discussions around performance and everything else, all that I had to do was present my diary. And that helped me in many ways. One, because there was a discipline or there was a method to the madness. And it helped me to continuously improve in terms of what I was doing, right? And when the appraisals came in and there were multiple people being evaluated, I let my work and my diary speak for what I did. So whenever someone said what happened, I was easily able to open my diary and say, here are the customers I met, here are my notes, right? And I remember when some of those things started to happen, the sales head, the country head for sales, took note of the effort, discipline which was there, and how that helped me to be successful, right? So, like I said, be sure that you focus on performance and nothing but performance. Performance obviously is outcome, right? Honestly, hard work doesn't matter beyond a point. It is important to do hard work. That's a table stakes and a given. But if there is one thing that matters, it is the performance that that you deliver, and your time will come. There will be every question, challenge. You will feel that you're not being recognized, all of that, but your time will come, and there is something that you need to be aware of. One of the subjects that I was taught at IMDR was systems perspective by Dr. Pupatkar at that point, and we would often wonder the relevance of that as a paper and what it meant. And now I can relate to quite a few of those conversations and what was being taught in college then. And systems perspective in my head is all about being able to realize the impact of what you are trying to do on the larger perspective, right? I mean, the larger picture. In any organization, there are multiple functions, right? There will be the product development, there will be the innovation R&D, there will be the delivery, there'll be sales, there'll be marketing. When you take a decision, it is important to realize that any decision, doesn't matter where you start your career, has an impact on everyone else in the organization. If you're in sales and go and sell something which is something that doesn't exist in your product, now I'm talking IT, right? Not industrial or manufacturing or any other industry where products are standardized. But if you were to try and go and sell a product which doesn't have the feature functionality that the customer is asking for, you have a dependency on the engineering team and the product development teams to be able to complete that and deliver to the customers, and thereafter go in and support that as well. So what you commit, what you do has an impact on their ability to deliver to the promise and your customer satisfaction therefore. Similarly, the other way around holds true as well, right? If you're a product development, you build a product, then someone else has to go and sell. So there's no point creating that doesn't sell. And that's where most of the startups today fail, because they're so passionate about their own product, but when it comes to rubber hitting the road, they just don't sell, right? Because there is a reality on the ground in terms of what customers are willing to pay for versus what you pay. So the point I'm trying to make is, it is important to have a systems perspective as you get into the corporate world. You may be starting your career with market research. You may start your career with IT, systems, project management, product marketing, but you will have a significant impact on every other function in the organization. So when you are trying to think, always be aware and ask those questions saying, if I did this, what is the impact of that on some other parts of the organization? And when you engage with your other stakeholders with that level of curiosity and thought, you will see a lot more acceptance and a lot more investment that people will be willing to do on you in terms of time and effort, right? So think from an organization standpoint. Think from the larger perspective. Values that of course matter in the corporate world. I did talk about hard work, but the attention to detail. Unfortunately, I think a lot of students miss out on this. It could be just an email, but do your spell check, right? The subject that you write on your email matters. The spelling mistakes that that may be there in an email that you draft matters, right? if you know that there is a challenge, for example, these days people use Grammarly because they just want to be right. I think leverage all kinds of tools, but make sure that you have an attention to detail, because that is what represents you. Right? When you send an email out, which you will do very often once you get into the corporate world, you will be talking or communicating with tens or hundreds of people. You may not get the same face time with everyone. So people will start judging you, if I can use that word, or associating you based on what you write, the way you communicate, and how you go about doing things. So the attention to detail in terms of everything that you do is a representation of who you are, and you are being evaluated or judged, for lack of a better word, based on what you do. So attention to detail, something that you must have, right? The other significant thing is commitment to timelines. Any task you do, it is important to make sure that you have a well thought through plan and you are clear that you will deliver to that timeline. Of course, you will never meet that timeline 100% of the times. There will be exceptions, but communicate, right? I mean, I have often seen it, it happens, by the way, even today in our own organization and elsewhere, that we are always waiting to complete the job or waiting for a perfect answer to communicate to anyone else who's on the other side expecting an answer. Now, imagine the plight of the person on the other side. He has no clue whether you have read the email, you're working on it, when to expect something. And if it is a customer who's eagerly waiting for a response, rest assured, the customer is not going to come back and give you any more business, right? So make sure that firstly you commit to timelines and deliver to them. It may be something as simple as saying, I will come back to you with my first draft of the report by so and so, right? I will complete my presentation and share that with you by Friday. Make sure you do that, right? And like I said, if you see a risk of that timeline or commitment not being met, communicate. I mean, I'm sure these are things which are taught to you, but the reality is when we get into the corporate world, we all start running so fast that we forget some of these basics, right? And that's where I'm saying everything that you do now, whether it is your internships, whether it is your project works, or even anything else that you're doing with industry collaboration or your first job, all this matters, right? Now, any questions so far? Riley, let me know if how do you want to moderate the questions, and then I can.
Yes, sir. Please raise the hand if you have any questions.
Okay. Right. So we'll just continue on that subject. The second thing which I want to talk about is how to get ready for the corporate world. Now, we keep saying that a good start means the job is half done. For most of you, this is probably going to be the first time you'll ever get into corporate world. That's 70%, as I heard. In this initial few years, which is probably going to be the next 3 to 5 years, make sure that you focus on being the best, right? I've seen a lot of students get very, very complacent the minute they take their first job, right? You feel that you arrived in life. Honestly, you haven't, right? That's just the first. You are lucky to have earned that opportunity, but you still have a long way in terms of making sure that you prove you are worth every dollar and every penny that the organization is spending on you, right? Probably 3 years, it's probably 5 years, but it is important to make the best of that. Almost treat it in a way that your performance in the next 1 month is going to define whether you're in the job or out of the job. To not show that level of desperation, passion, commitment, you will struggle. And if, trust me, if you are able to put that effort in the first 3 to 5 years, you will probably earn another few years in terms of growth over a period of time. So make sure that you focus on doing nothing but the best. Don't get complacent with your job just because you got a great break in a good company, right? You need to still deliver. You need to still learn a lot. and be curious. Right? I very often see a lot of people hesitating to ask questions. And by the way, this is not just true of students, right? Even in regular conversations, I see a lot of hesitation when people are not sure about something, but but do not ask those questions. It is extremely important to be curious. It's extremely important to ask those questions. Not know something, that's your best time to ask, because 1 year into that job, people will assume you are already aware of everything. So you may not have the window to ask those questions, right? And like I earlier spoke about the systems perspective. Ask questions saying, if we did this, what happened? How did someone else solve this problem? Right? It may be the simplest of questions, but by being curious and why it is being done and how it works, you will learn a lot more, right? And sometimes people will actually say that it's a good question because I actually didn't think of it that way. So sometimes your curious questions may actually trigger a thought in the other person's mind, right? So make sure that you're asking those questions and being well prepared for every decision, every act that you make, right? The other thing which I've also seen is, I'm sure a lot of you have been thinking, saying, I want to take up a career in sales, I want to take up a career in marketing, and probably a little more clear saying, yeah, I want to take up something in sales, probably in B2B or B2C and so on and so forth. But what is important is, as you get into those roles, understand the org structure. And I can't emphasize the importance of this. It is important for you to start understanding why an organization is structured in the way it is. That will give you a lot of answers, right? For example, why is the org structure of a TCS very different from a product company like a Subex? What is the org structure of a Subex, and why is it different from that of a startup company like a Paytm? Why is the org structure of a Paytm different from that of a Microsoft? There are enough reasons as to why organizations are structured in that way. And when you start getting into the details, you will actually see that there are interesting roles that exist in different organizations, right? Product management. It's a skill and an art that has evolved over the recent years. And the definition of product management itself as a role, for example, has radically changed in the last 10 years, right? And in fact, you will see more and more product managers product managers being founders of startup companies, right? So for you to understand why an organization has certain roles, start by trying to understand the org structure. When you go into your internship, just don't restrict yourself to that area alone. Try to understand who are the different roles, who does what, why is it not done differently. And if you have other friends from this batch who are doing internships at other places, have those conversations. How is that organization structured? Does this role which I see here exist in that? Who performs this job in another company? It is important for you to have those conversations. And I would encourage the faculty to moderate those conversations between students where there is knowledge sharing happening between these internships as well, right? Otherwise, you almost take things for granted. You go into an organization, see something, and you believe that is how the rest of the world is. But trust me, one company is different from the other. My competition may be different than I am, right? So will a TCS operate the same way as a Cognizant or a Wipro? Definitely yes. And that is what drives them to be successful in some scenarios and unsuccessful in others. But important to understand the why part of the organization more than the how. It is but natural that you will get into saying, okay, how does this happen? Right? Because by virtue of, I think it is something which is culturally true with Indians. We are so execution focused that we just get into the how part of it very, very soon. Understand and focus on the why. And that will get you a lot more answers than what you would have otherwise thought. And like I said, have these discussions with your friends. Talking about execution, we spoke about two parts, right? One is making sure you do a great start with your job as you get in. and second, talk about be focused on trying to commit to timelines. And if you see, all these are about execution. In the early stages of your career, you may not have the opportunity for decision making. You will be focused on trying to do execute to what is being told to you, right? It is important for you to focus on being an extremely good executor. You are expected to be a doer, right? Of course, you get to add your own masalas and twist to it, but the point is you need to excel at execution, and that is what is going to stand out. Because when someone calls you up and gives you a task, the expectation is that it will be done, right? And by the way, it's okay to do a little more, but not at the cost of giving up on something which is told to you, right? If someone has asked you to do a certain project or a report in a certain way, don't try to change the report itself. Do what is being told to you, but if you want another perspective, bring another perspective over and above that. And that there is a thought, there is an intent, but the fact that you've already delivered and thinking more will actually make you stand out. The other thing which I have seen is don't get swayed away by titles. I mean, I can, and unfortunately, this is true again at all parts of life, right? There was once a person who left the organization because he thought he was going to be a vice president at another company, but only to realize that the same company had 4 vice presidents doing the same job, right? And this is something we're all guilty of. So do not get carried away by title. When you're sitting in for your placements, when you're going in and doing your internships, honestly, it doesn't matter what is the title. A title in a small company versus title in a big company is very, very different things. You could be in a 10 people company and calling yourself a vice president, or you could be a senior director in a company which is 2,000 people. The senior director obviously has a higher authority, responsibility, and exposure, right? Obviously, in these days with the startup, things can be different, but the point I'm trying to say is don't get swayed by titles. Focus on making sure you understand the role better. Focus on what is it that will help you learn more, right? And then pick roles or jobs that help you to do that learning much better in early stages of your career. Be a doer, because once you get into that role, focus on doing nothing but delivering to what is being told to you. The key point is, as you get into these new organizations, right, it is important for you to find a coach, sponsor, a guide wherever you are working. And trust me, there are enough people out there who are willing to help people out to be successful, particularly young talent. It is important for you to find who is that 1 or 2 or 3 people who are willing to give you that 15 minutes every week to help you to be successful, who can act as a sounding board, who can tell you what is right or wrong, right? I want to go in the evening. My batchmates are all in Bombay. We are going out for a drink, right? I mean, let that happen. That has a place for it. But if at the same time someone else is giving you that opportunity to go and learn and do that, that takes priority over everything else. Fun has its place, celebration has its place, but then it is important to make sure you find people who are willing to invest time, effort on making you successful. You have to go look for them. You have to go and ask, because without asking, nobody is going to come and give you their time, right? So you have to go and ask for it. On the element of being curious, it is important to demonstrate this eagerness in every interaction, every conversation. When you engage in your internships, when you engage in your projects or your first job, demonstrate that eagerness to learn. Spend that weekends, go back to the office just trying to do read-ups, right? Because during the course of the week, maybe you didn't have the time to read or do something. Make that extra effort to try and make sure that you are learning as much as possible. Every organization invests fair amount of time and effort into L&D, learning and development. There will be videos, there will be tutorials. go and try to complete as much as you can, even if it is not your area of expertise, right? Because tomorrow when you are expected to do something in a certain role, understanding and appreciation of the other role will help you take a much more educated decision. Right? If you are in IT, nothing stops you from asking, saying, can I talk to the customer or sit on a call where you are interacting with the customer so I can hear firsthand? At first, they will say, no, there's nothing, right? Which is also fine, why they can't let you in on everything, but you have to ask, right? Ask for being in front of the customer, ask for exposure to other parts of the organization. But for that, you have as well, which is where I'm saying leverage every opportunity out there to learn that the organization provides and then go and ask for more. And each of these small things, however small or obvious they may sound, makes a huge impact after a few years, because you will realize that your thought process is now much broader than what it is, what most others have. Other thing is, if obviously today's world there are two kinds of organizations, right? You have the traditional brick and mortar enterprises, then you have the large corporates, then you also have the startups. And the nature of roles of each of these organizations is very different. When you talk about corporates, there is a set mindset, there is a way of doing things, there is a structure, there are people, you're given a role, you're asked to execute. Obviously, in these kind of jobs, the expectation is that you will learn to execute well. You have a prescribed deliverable, keep delivering to that with some amount of creative thoughts and perspectives to add more value. But obviously, when you work for a startup, it is very different ballgame. And I don't know where your aspirations are, but that's something that you should try and discover. Working in a startup is a completely different challenge. And I can tell you, even for people who have fair amount of experience working with enterprises, not everyone would be successful in a startup, right? And people who are successful in a startup may not be successful in an enterprise, because the requirements of roles in each of these types of organization is very different. In a startup, you like I said, you may be a 20 people company. You may have a role which is, let's say, inside sales or business development, but you would be probably wearing the role of someone from product marketing, or maybe at times you will also be wearing the role of a product owner, for example, right? So you are expected to wear multiple hats, but you should also have the ability to dream, because in a startup world, your product is only 20% ready. The rest of it is something that will evolve in customer conversations. So you're expected to dream, you're expected to try and deliver to the dream as well, right? Whereas in an enterprise, you're only delivering, because a lot of it is predictable. So be aware of these kind of nuances in terms of the ask. Don't simply go to a startup because it's a cool thing to do, right? The DNA expectations, the pace expectations, the risks, of course, needless to say, I'm sure you're all aware, is very different in each of this, and both have their merits. Okay? So make sure that when you are picking a job of your choice, when you're picking a career of that you would like to pursue, you are aware of what it takes. When one of the things when I with IMDR or rather password of IMDR, sorry, was I was always in two minds whether I wanted to be pursue a career in let's say business roles, which is like sales, marketing, or whether I wanted to be a tech role, right? More like a developer, project manager, architect kind of a thing. And I thought I was pretty good at, or I could do a good job at both. And as much as I did my primary specialization in sales and a minor in systems, I went in and did a course on Oracle SQL programming, right? And just to test my skills and see if that was something that I would like. And this, by the way, is after MBA, where most of the work is already done. And I taught the class in terms of the Oracle SQL training itself. But I realized at the end of it that I'm not sure I would be very comfortable sitting behind a desk and just staring into the computer for throughout the day, right? I enjoyed speaking with customers, and I said maybe that's not my cup of tea, and I moved on. Right? Similarly, I think it's important for you to understand or figure out a way to experiment and realize what is it that you are comfortable, what is it that you don't want to do. You are all very fortunate that in today's world, there are enough and more opportunities being given to youngsters to try out and experiment. Jumping from one kind of a role to another is seen as a plus, which wasn't the case many years ago, right? So if you are not very sure of what you want, it may be a good time to see how you can leverage your internships to try and do that. And by the way, if you are interviewing at some place for an internship, I would actually encourage you to even be candid with that company and say that I'm in two minds about these careers and I want to use this internship to know if this is something I want to pursue. Nothing stops you from saying that. Even that clarity of mind is something that organizations appreciate, right? Because I know for a fact that when someone says I'm willing to validate this and use this next 2 months for that, I expect or anticipate that person is going to go all out to try and understand what it takes to be in that role, right? So be honest with that, but find every opportunity you can to experiment and figure out and discover what is the kind of a job and role that you enjoy and you thrive. It is not to say one job is better than the other, but it is about what makes you more happy. Like I said, you probably got another 35 years for you to go. So make sure it is something that makes you happy. One another point before we pause for any questions. We're all humans. We all make mistakes, right? And I do mistakes too. But one of the things that we do as we encourage, even as leaders, is we keep saying that it is important for us to make sure that we realize that a mistake has happened, right? I mean, I remember recently we had a situation where one of the freshers who was new to the team and was trained, actually went in and did a task which brought down a server on which a lot of customers were hosted. Now, the person there was he was actually good enough to come back and say that went to his manager and said, "Look, I think I did something. Server is down. Let's go back and I don't know what to do." It was a weekend. But at least it gave us the opportunity to immediately focus on getting the machine and the server and our customers back in action. Right? And I've also seen similar situations where people just try to pretend like nothing has happened. And then what you realize is that you have a lot more customers who are unhappy and a lot more effort which goes into reversing that. Right? The truth is, the organization has no intent or bandwidth to try and penalize people. Everyone wants to do is move forward. So if you are making a mistake, own up your mistakes, accept that. We all do mistakes, we all are humans, right? And your managers will do mistakes as well. But make sure that you accept them very quickly so that you can focus on resolving or addressing that problem before it becomes too big. And also it is important because you would rather spend the time trying to fix it rather than trying to cover it up, which is more productive. Obviously trying to address it and move on so that next time you say, next time this is not going to happen, and I will ensure that anyone else like me who is a fresher will not make the same mistakes. Right? Maybe you can volunteer and say, I'm going to make up for this by trying to help create a process, or I will share my experience which can be shared with all new joiners. Right? There are ways in which you can own up mistakes and make sure that the organization learns as much as you are. Those are some of the key things I would say in terms of being ready to be part of the corporate world. Focus on making the best of the start that you get. Be curious, number 2, right? Ask questions. Be extremely good at execution, number 3, right? The 4th, Find a good coach or a sponsor who will help you and will stay invested in making you successful. And find ways to try and validate and experiment with your likes and dislikes, right? And accept mistakes. These are about 7 things which I would say are things that you should practice and make sure it will help you to get ready for the corporate world. Riley, you want to take any questions?
Yes, please raise your hands. Yes, Samruddhi.
So, sir, my question was that sometimes what happens is that someone who has an interest in finance and who has learned finance has to work, like someone has to work in a field that is other than theirs. So, for example, like a finance guy has to work in marketing, and though he is ready to take up the responsibility, but I guess they lack motivation doing that because that is not their field. So, what do you suggest such people?
Is this for a job or an internship?
For a job.
Sure. So firstly, it's a good question. Not everyone gets to pursue something that you like. There are 2 ways to do that, in my view. Again, there's not one right answer, but I'll try and answer that to the best possible manner. What I would do if I was in a situation where I was given, I mean, I'll go back to my first job after IMDR, right? I was asked to do something which is not ideal. Yeah, it was not, it was sales still, right? But I was asked to report into someone who is passed out in just a few months or a year ahead of me. But I said, if I have to do or earn something better in this organization, I first have to deliver what is asked of me. So I would say spend your next 1 year making sure that you deliver to whatever is the role or the task assigned to you. And after that, at that point, once the organization realizes that you are someone with potential, that you are someone with promise, you can go in and say that I have done this, but I want to try my hand at finance because that's where I want to go. And while that happens in the 1 year, you could do 2 things. One, deliver to the job, but equally, as I was saying, you have to realize how does that job have a correlation with finance as an organization? Right? If finance is doing budgeting and this is sales, as an example, what is the correlation between sales and finance? How does the budgeting happen? You can find other ways for you to learn aspects of finance while working in this function as well. You do that for about a year. And if it still doesn't appeal to you, or if you feel that organization is not going to give you that opportunity, then maybe it's time for you to move. It's absolutely fine. But if you have an opportunity on hand, your ability to earn something within that organization by proving a point is much higher than trying to go to a new organization and then trying to prove yourself all over again. Right? But if you decided to commit to something, I would urge you to stick to that, deliver first, and not use that as a means saying, or as a launch pad saying, yeah, I will take this up, but I'll keep looking. Don't do that mistake. Because in that 6 months, you will not be able to do justice to that job. You will not be successful. You will not be seen as a good performer, and you will rest assured leave on a poor note, because the organization is investing time, effort, and bandwidth on to make you successful. Rather, you would say that I don't want to take that job. I'm absolutely fine. That would be dealt with respect as well. To give you an example, when we had our campus placements, I was, at least one thing I was sure. I said I wanted to be in an IT company. And we didn't have an IT company coming onto the campus at that point for the first week. So day 1 of our campus placements, when we had all colleges, all organizations on campus for hiring, I was actually in Mumbai. I bought a magazine which said top 50 fast growing companies in IT. And I went company to company and I handed over my CV on the same day. Because I took a decision saying I am not going to go elsewhere. If it means I'm paying a price of not being able to leverage a few things, that's okay. Right? So I hope that answers your question, Samruddhi.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Yes, Diganto.
Yes, thank you. Sir, my question is that as a manager, how will channelize proper vertical communication in an organization? As in, just as you mentioned, that collaboration and knowledge sharing is becoming a key these days in organizations, and it is also a prerequisite. So, how do you, can you just suggest some ways to execute that efficiently?
Great question, Diganta. Diganta, I'm going to park your question because I have something to talk about next on leadership. So I will answer your question as part of that. If that's okay.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
Who's next?
Sir, can we continue the lecture or should we take the questions now?
We can take. I see two hands. Let's take those two questions and then we can go back.
Okay. Anuja, please unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, Saili. So, sir, my question is like we have dual specialization, major and minor. So, like during the placement or like during interview process, like, does it create a good impact on the interviewer that we have dual specialization?
Absolutely not. I mean, today, if we all know about liberal arts, right? Why is liberal arts thriving if you look at it from an academic standpoint? Because people are trying to explore and experiment with different aspects. In fact, if you go to these large organizations, which is the likes of the Googles and so on, you'll find that someone is a civil architect, but being asked to do some other job, right? I think organizations these days, particularly the tech companies, are extremely open to experimentation. I can give you examples where I have done that with multiple folks, and they've been extremely successful. There was someone who was into implementation of products, right? So a half techie, a domain expert, an SME, and decided to give him an opportunity to get into sales. It was an experiment, but he's done extremely well and continues to do so. Recently, we were trying to hire someone who had left IT about 15, 20 years ago, and now a hotelier as well as a designer, right? I mean, he does architecture and design for large buildings. Wanted to give it a shot and say that we will try this person for customer success. Now, the reason I'm giving some of these examples is that at some point, organizations realize that there are a lot of soft skills and there are a lot of other things which make a person successful. So organizations are willing to bet on that. The specialization that you pick is more in terms of an indicator in terms of where you would like to pursue your interest. Other than that, honestly, I don't think it really matters much. What matters is how you are able to try and leverage that for whatever work you're trying to pick up. In fact, I would, when I interview people, I usually end up trying to talk to them more about their job or their internships and what they learned, etc. It is less about what specialization, right? It is the application of what you learned that is more important than the subjects or papers itself. Now, I can also tell you there may be an example which works the other way around, right? For example, we had Ramco Systems who visited our campus, and they were very clear saying, I want people with operations experience. So in some cases, there will be roles which are fairly rigid on what they require. But at a high level, I would still say if you're looking at areas which are otherwise, it's absolutely fine. It really doesn't matter. But again, if you think you can do well, organizations are willing to kind of ignore that and give you the benefit.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
So there are no more questions for now.
Sure.
So I think we should continue.
Right. that was an interesting question, I thought, from Diganta, right? And in fact, that was something which I wanted to talk about. It is again there are a few things which are very unique to us as Indians, and I will call out a few of that. One, like I said, we have a execution bias. We very quickly jump into trying to do things rather than do a very good job at planning, which is very, very, where they spend a lot of time trying to make sure they have a good plan, right? The second thing which is very curious or interesting about Indians is Indians are very happy with what we have achieved, right? So most of the time you will see the narrative or conversations being about, we have done this, we have achieved this, this is what we have done, right? But you go to any other country which is very forward looking, they will not talk much about what has happened. They will talk a lot more about what is likely to happen, right? And that is a significant difference in terms of the approach. And this actually struck me when I was attending the Expo 2020, which I'm sure some of you would have seen ads of that being hosted in Dubai. And basically what happens in Expo 2020 is there are stalls or there are large setups, and each country is showcasing what they have done and what they are investing in terms of science, technology, ecology, environment, and different areas. I mean, I went to the stall, which was Russia, and they were talking about how the brain is not just a computer or a supercomputer, but how the brain is actually 10 times more powerful than the internet, right? Because internet is a significantly larger in terms of impact and potential. Then you go into Netherlands or Sweden, and then you would see a lot of work happening around sustainability and so on. And then I went to Indian booth, and there was a lot of talk about Chandrayaan and what we have achieved, right? So the point I'm trying to make is, I'm not taking away any credit from what we are achieving and the potential we have as a country, right? I have immense amount of passion and love for India, but I think it is important for us to channelize our efforts into the future. That's the second part. And maybe it's a completely different conversation or a debate. But coming to the third point, which Diganta asked, very unique that in India we all think about being managers. Honestly, you go to some other parts of the world, they are less interested in being a manager. In fact, I had a person who was heading our North America business, and he basically decided to give up that and take up an individual contributor role after almost 25 years of experience. He was doing extremely well, by the way, right? In different countries, the realization and the respect for being able to pursue something which you're passionate about is a lot more important than titles. Managing people is a different skill set. It will come with time. Don't rush yourself into trying to be a manager or leading people. If you're given the opportunity, so be it. But only if you learn it first can you teach or manage someone else. Imagine trying to manage a set of people who are looking up to you for answers, but you have not had the opportunity to learn it yourself. So how are you going to teach that to a set of people? So please do not jump into trying to aspire to be managers. Of course, to some of them it comes naturally, right? So not taking any of that away. But I'm just saying, be mindful that when managing a team, leadership is a very, very different ballgame. Because the people below you, you are now responsible not just for your own success, you're responsible for the success of every individual in that team. And this is true whether you are working in the corporate world, startup world, you're an entrepreneur, etc. And it comes naturally to some. But if you are supposed to do, let's say you're a manager and you're supposed to manage a team of 5 people, how are you going to review them? How are you going to monitor their performance on a weekly, monthly basis? How are you going to report that to the senior management? If your team is stuck, how are you going to help them out to be successful? What kind of people or talent will you hire? There is so much of other work which goes into people management or people leadership, right? So being a manager will come, but don't jump into those kind of roles unless you have spent time mastering some other parts, right? But again, this is a generic statement. There will be exceptions in terms of extraordinary people being able to do extraordinary things much faster. Right? I mean, there will be people who will be an extremely good, let's say, CEO with 6 months experience. I mean, I work for a startup where the CEO, co-founders were people who were, I mean, he used to work at Subex Ltd, and this is at Clivo. I was reporting into the CEO, and there was someone who I had interacted probably once while working at Subex, and he was just a fresher or a grad at that point. But honestly, full credit to him. And it really didn't matter because he was extremely good at what he was doing. So like I said, some people it comes naturally and they become leaders very soon, and some others take time. Santa,
Thank
do
you,
you want
sir.
to take your question? Does it answer your question, or is there anything
Yes, sir.
else that
Yes,
you
sir.
want to
Yes, sir. It was insightful, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Okay, so that was on leadership. Realize the distinction between being an executor, being a people manager, and leadership. They're completely different things. Being a people manager doesn't mean you're a leader. Being a leader doesn't mean that you don't have responsibilities either, right? But that distinction is important. I mean, I was talking recently to one of the startups which I'm associated with. The company had acquired or merged with a few other companies. And the CEO is now suddenly in a role where he was managing a small team, executing, doing well, but now he has to deal with a scale which is probably 5 times of what he managed about a year ago. And the expectations from the investors is now much higher. So he's supposed to stop doing what he's meant to do over the years and now start picking up new things which he's meant to do, right? So what got you here? Again, you would have heard this. What got you here is not enough to keep you even alive at where you are. You need to do things very differently from there to even sustain, be there, or grow. And just be aware of that as you get along. The talking about a bit of the IT industry, right? That's where I come in from. A few things have changed in the IT industry over the years. Of course, the fundamental shift from services to being product companies. Subex is one of the first product companies in India and the oldest product company other than Tally today. And we took a call at that point saying product management is being a product company is a lot more value than just being a services company. So the shift is evident. You will see enough and more startups happening which are all product companies, nothing but product companies. So IT itself has transitioned from being more of a services industry or a services domain to being a product domain. The second is within the IT org as well, there is a much higher value in being a specialist, right? Specialist roles are being created within each function, within each kind of an organization. Doesn't matter what scale, but organizations are willing to spend more if there are specialists in that area, right? And thanks to the gig economy, what happens these days is, let's say we have, by the way, multiple incubations within Subex, and we are also doing a few changes in terms of how we deliver and engage. And we had this opportunity to say, how do I move from a traditional waterfall delivery to an agile? There were two approaches. Obviously, I could train my people and go the journey. That will take a lot of time. I could hire new people, but hiring people wasn't easy either, right? So we decided to bring in experts in those fields who would come in. Obviously, they charge a lot more. We are willing to spend that, but they help us actually fast track that transformation from being a waterfall to an agile organization, right? So the point I'm trying to say is specialization has a significant value in today's corporate world, and organizations are willing to spend for such people, on such people for such roles. So as much as you learn some of these skill sets and you acquire new skills in your journey, try and be a specialist at a few things at least, and that will go a long way, right? So specialization matters. Being generic is good, but not good enough, right? The other thing which I would say is there is an increasing focus on customer. More than anything else, I think these days organizations have a single mandate and focus, saying, how do we ensure there is an adequate amount of empathy in terms of understanding our customers and delivering value, right? The role called customer success is relatively recent. It is a role that has got created in about last 6-7 years. It didn't exist before that, right? The whole, the traditional way of taking feedbacks has moved from CSAT surveys, customer satisfaction surveys, to NPS, right? So the need for the obsession with the customer has increased multifold over the years, and this is very evident in how organizations are making that transformation. I spoke about the example of moving from waterfall to agile. The whole reason for the transformation is also driven by the fact that customers get to see increasing value and at much shorter time frames than the traditional way. In a traditional model, you would probably deliver value to the customer 6 months, 10 months down. But now I'm able to deliver or demonstrate that value in 6 weeks, or sometimes even in 4 weeks, right? And the only reason it will work better is because customer is deriving more value. So the point I'm making is customer focus, empathy is another significant transformation which we are seeing in the IT industry. And talking internally as an employer, the ask is constantly looking for people who can commit and deliver, right? These are things that organizations are less patient to people who do not perform. I mean, gone are the days where you could come in and say, yeah, it's okay, we'll carry along, we'll watch next year. People are getting extremely impatient as employees. Organizations are getting impatient as employers as well. So it is important to make sure that we find people who can commit to deliver. And that has, again, a premium. When we evaluate people, when we appraise people, the people who make commitments and deliver are given a lot more weight and credibility than people who make commitments but may not deliver. Right? You may be making a slightly lesser commitment because it's more realistic, and that doesn't mean I'm encouraging you to be conservative, by the way, right? But deliver to the commitments once you make it. Just want to repeat: one is specialize. Specialization has a value. IT organizations are moving from services companies to being product companies. Customer focus is a significant priority, and the need for people who can commit and deliver is an always. I mean, you will be a premium resource if you are someone who can commit and deliver, right? And on that note, let me briefly also talk about the so-called Great Resignation that you all been talking about. There are obviously two sides to the same story, right? From an employee standpoint, umpteen number of opportunities, a lot more salary hikes, a lot more opportunities, a lot more freedom, etc., which is all great, right? But at the same time, what has also happened, if I were to look at it as an employer, is performance of individuals hasn't significantly improved. Compensations have gone up, but the performance and what the value that the organization is able to get today from the sources has not improved or increased at the same rate, right? And of course, with people trying to be opportunistic, make a commitment, pick something, window shop, go take another job. It may work today, but it is a short-lived approach, right? So The reason I'm talking about this as a great resignation, as an issue, is it is okay for people to look out for another job. And by any, that's absolutely fine at any given point. But once you made a commitment, and that commitment is based on the fact that you like something, it is important for you to stick with it. Right? Don't get swayed again. Don't get carried away simply, or don't be opportunistic, because trust me, it is a small world. If you think your HR person is not connected to 20 other HR organizations and know where you are moving, try your luck, right? So people are not necessarily able to realize that the great resignation actually is not good for the industry. It's not good for people at large, right? So be mindful when you try and see situations like this, that of course I want you all to leverage and make the best of it, but also have the clarity in terms of what is it that you want and commit to it. Don't be on the edge constantly trying to jump. It doesn't help you. If you think your organization or your employer is not going to see this on your CV, they will see it. And you will be evaluated for that in your next jump. Right? So these are things which I think I would want you to be, particularly for anyone who's looking at taking up a role in an IT organization, be aware and mindful of some of these things that are changing, and the ask that they would have from people like you. I have people who have specialized in finance but doing project management, right? I mean, we heard of lateral hires. I'm sure a lot of organizations today do lateral hires. So make sure that, and this happens largely with IT, by the way. Unique to IT, it doesn't happen in any other industry. I mean, you wouldn't take an automobile engineer and put him on an aerospace, right? But IT is one industry where you will see that there is a lot more freedom to experiment with roles and talent. And I want you to be mindful of that, but have the clarity. I would summarize that this whole aspect of whatever we spoke about as, make sure that whatever you do, you are valuable to the organization, right? If you are valuable to your organization, if you are valuable to your manager, if you are valuable to your team, you will be in demand. But the way to make yourself valuable is something that you will need to discover once you are in. And it will be different ways of doing that for different organizations, because every organization will have their own culture, own priorities, values, etc. But you need to figure out how do you make yourself valuable by demonstrating, delivering value, delivering to whatever is being asked of you. Just do that, you will never have to worry about your appraisals, because that will get taken care of. Because people around you will realize that here is one person who is valuable because his success influences my success. Right? Working in a corporate world is a team sport. You can never be successful in isolation. And I think this is actually a story from the Navy SEALs in the US. If you read up on them, they would tell you that when they hire for people, they don't hire for people who are extremely good at something else. They pick people who are slightly lesser than that, but extremely good team players, right? Because they are not just trying to do things for them, their own individual success, but they do things which will help the larger team to be a lot more successful. Yeah. So those were some of the key things that I wanted to talk about today. I'm absolutely happy to take any questions. Otherwise, it may seem more like a monologue, but would like to take any questions if there are.
Yes, Kalyani.
Yes, good morning, sir. Kalyani this side.
Good morning.
First of all, I would like to thank you for such an insightful webinar. And my question is, sir, as a finance student, I don't have any engineering background. So, as I want to shift to the IT industry, how much self improvement in terms of technical knowledge is necessary in spite of being from a non technical background?
See, like I said, if you want to go into IT, there are a lot of roles where you don't need to be a specialist or you don't need to be a developer to be in IT. What you need is, honestly, IT, most of it, the way I look at it, is logic. The whole IT is built on the premise of digital, which is 0 and 1. So as an industry, that industry thinks very, very logically. It is more logical than any other industry, in my view. So if you could always pick multiple roles in IT where you don't need to necessarily know coding, but you are able to bring value from your domain. For example, you said you're from finance, if I got that right.
Yes,
Right?
sir. Yes, sir.
If you're in finance, nothing stops you from going to a neobank or a fintech and saying that, can I be the SME who will understand the functional aspects of the finance banking and then translate that into business requirements, which will get implemented by someone else. And that's an SME or a solution design kind of a role. And those kind of roles exist in IT today. Right? So maybe you need to find some of these organizations to understand, saying, this is where my aspiration is. I want to make this shift, but with this kind of a background, what kind of roles can I start with? Once you get that break, do so well, and then you can actually figure out, like I said earlier, right? Every organization has a culture, it has a hierarchy, it has specific set of roles and responsibilities. Once you understand that, then you can start trying to come up with a plan saying, maybe I want to experiment with this role, maybe I want to move there, here is how I will do that, and incrementally grow. And by the way, those changes and growth can happen very, very fast within an organization, particularly for people who perform. I can tell you as an employer, anyone who delivers or performs, we make sure that we give them every opportunity to experiment. If someone says, I want to go into this kind of a role, I've done this, but I want to go elsewhere, we will try and provide them with that opportunity.
Okay, so my next question is like you said, is it possible for me that I can shift from industry to industry? Like I would be in the banking industry after a few months. So is it easy for me that I would prefer banking and then fintech and
Okay, let me start by asking you a question. Why would you want to do that? What is the motivation that you would want to do it?
so motivation is something like I want to work in the different roles.
So there are two ways you may want to approach that kind of a thing. If you went in and said, I'll work with a bank for 1 year, I will work with a neobank for another year, I'll go to an insurance in another year, it will look like you're confused and all over the place. Right? Because when your CV is being screened, that's how you will be interpreted. But what you may want to do is take a step back and say, what kind of roles will give me an opportunity to experiment or experience all of these kind of facets? Can I actually get into one of the big 3, big 4 organizations? Can I get into a KPMG or a Deloitte or a PwC or an organization which is doing consulting for these kind of companies? Right? I think we lost her, but essentially the point is there will be roles which will allow you to experiment with different kinds of enterprises. Maybe that is where we should go in and try and find an opportunity rather than simply jumping jobs, because that may not be seen in the right way.
Okay. Okay, sure, sir. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Yashraj.
Yes, sir. So my question was that sometimes the job role and responsibilities that are offered are very good, but the package is sometimes low. So in such situations, how should we take the decision?
Yeah, you want to be a horse for the long race. you are so early stages in your career. Honestly, I think you should be able to afford those kind of differences. If you think it will pay you in the long run, that's what you should do. I can tell you from my own experience. Um, I'll go back to my own early days of when I started my career. I started off with a salary of 6,500 rupees. That's what I that is what I signed up for, uh, because that was a job, kind of a job I wanted, um, and it paid off, right? Uh, there was another time where I had to choose between a company which was giving me more money, uh, and there was Tech Mahindra was paying me slightly less. It was called MBT in those days, paying little lesser. Um, but I valued the fact that they were in the industry for a long time, gave me a little bit of stability, but the opportunity to experience a lot more. Um, so I chose to take the path of willing to let go of the compensation because my learning here was going to be higher, right? I worked in Dubai. I took a decision to come back to India, and obviously that took a significant impact on my pay and ability to earn. Uh, but again, the amount of learning I've had, the opportunities that have been given to me, and the fact that today I'm a COO and a board member has paid off, right? So it is important for you to weigh the role and learning a lot more at this stage of your career than anything else. We all need money. No two ways about it. We need money to survive. Everyone has a mortgage, but if that's something that you can afford, learning any day comes ahead of uh, compensation.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Yes, Abhishek.
Yes. So my question is, how can we fit properly, like being a fresher without any prior work experience in any other field?
Um, can you elaborate on that question when you say how can I be fit? What is the maybe you want to explain that a little better. I understand the part about being a fresher, but give me some more context.
Yes, sir. Like I have experience in quality background, sir.
Okay.
So I'm currently I'm doing operation and supply chain management.
Okay.
So for them, I'm fresher. I have experience in quality, but for operation and management, I'm fresher for them. So how can uh, I will be fit for that place?
See, if you heard the first part of what I spoke about being ready for the corporate world, if you already worked somewhere, Abhishek, the truth is you know the ways of working of an organization. Uh, so your new employer doesn't need to tell you that, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
in some sense, you still have a advantage over some others. Of course, if someone else is going for a specific role with that similar experience, that person will definitely have a little more weight. Uh, but the fact that you have some experience, I would say you need to um, be aware what aspect of that learning is going to help you be more successful in this kind of a role, and that's all that you can talk about. And
Okay, okay,
that
sir.
answer is something that you should have more than anyone else. And if you don't have that answer,
Yes,
maybe
yes,
you
sir.
should talk to the faculty to help you discover um, that relevance and value.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
So, as there are no questions now, I would like to hand it over to Shravani for the vote of thanks.
Thanks, Saili. So it's my honor and privilege to offer a vote of thanks in this occasion. I, Shravani Potnis, on behalf of DES IMDR, would like to convey my sincere gratitude to Mr. Shankar Roddam for giving us time and enlightening us on understanding that as the industry requirements are getting specific, it is important to nurture skills that will help students being industry ready, which will not only get us noticed and selected by the best corporate entities within the industry, but also would make them consider us favorably for a job that is prosperous and our acquired skills can be put to use in the most productive ways possible. Sir, your thoughts, experiences, and perspectives have really inspired us. Despite all the unexpected difficulties that came your way, your resilience proved that nothing is impossible. Hard work has always been your core expectation from self, and people around you. A few takeaways that I would like to state are that performance counts in every situation. It is necessary to communicate important details in the organization and ask questions as and when required, and try to understand the organization structure by not restricting ourselves to a particular department. Also, to take efforts and identify the right set of people who are eager to help us. Being generic is good but not enough, so it's important to specialize in some department and in some skills, to not get swayed away by the titles, and to keep discovering new requirements, roles, and type of organizations, and to choose a field and a role that makes us happy. These pieces of information are really encouraging, helpful, and will be valuable for us in our future corporate endeavor. So, from the core of our heart, we thank you once again, sir. Now, I would also like to thank our director, ma'am, the faculty, the non teaching staff for constantly supporting and encouraging us in respect of such corporate connect. I thank the entire student organizing team, the technical support, and last but not the least, all my student colleagues without whom this session could not have been successful. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank
Again,
you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for this provoking, thought-provoking, and very, very interesting session, sir. We are really grateful for your time and your effort which you took to share your thoughts with our students. We are really grateful to you for answering a very, very relevant, questions, for answering variety of questions so meticulously. We are grateful to you for discussing very relevant issues, addressing the apprehensions of the budding managers regarding placements. So thank you so much. It was
no problem.
truly
Thank you.
truly very enriching session, very insightful, sir. Thank you so much.
I thank you all for the opportunity, and I do hope it will help the students and the college in some way. If it does,